forgot to announce before we begin, please make sure that your cell phones are on silent. Good morning. Welcome, parents, students, and friends, to the 32nd edition of Carlisle Forum. Forum is an annual tradition that has become a rite of passage for the 8th grade students. It was originally developed in 1990 by Ms. Linda Gibson in conjunction with the late Mrs. Peggy Ford. Forum is a formal research paper on an important current or historical topic. The history and English departments coordinate together for the Forum program to enable students to develop critical reading and writing skills using historical analysis, primary and secondary resources, and contemporary media. Students learn the value of academic research and of exploring various points of view. They investigate assigned topics and create a multi-draft research paper, which is ultimately crafted into a short oral presentation. Let's take this opportunity to recognize the 8th grade students for all of their hard work. I would like to also thank the parents of the 8th grade students for their advice and support during this complex project. Please join me in recognizing Mrs. Linda Gibson and Mrs. Meredith Nicoletti for their countless hours of advising, coaching, reading rough drafts, making corrections and suggestions, and instilling in their students the importance of always doing their best work. Thank you so much. Your efforts are greatly appreciated. Now, let's welcome this morning's panelists. Anika Banerjee is our senior student panelist this morning. She has attended Carlisle since kindergarten. Anika is the daughter of Dr. and Mrs. Deepak and Kimberly Banerjee and has 3 younger siblings that all attend Carlisle. Avi is in the 7th grade, Jay is in the 6th grade, and Zara is in the 3rd grade. Anika has played volleyball at Carlisle since 6th grade and played club volleyball for 4 years as a middle blocker and defensive specialist. Her current hobbies are going to the gym, baking, playing volleyball, and spending time with her friends. Anika is a board member of CHIL and the president of the Teen Arts Council. She is the senior class SCA treasurer and on the honor council as well. Anika was nominated for the Jefferson Scholar and also received the William and Mary Leadership Award. She plans to double major in biology and English at Virginia Commonwealth University this fall. Anika fondly remembers working with Mrs. Gibson and Mrs. Nicoletti on her own forum project on CRISPR gene editing. Welcome, Anika. Mr. James McLean is a native of Martinsville, Virginia. He graduated from Carlisle School and then went to Vanderbilt University, where he graduated with a major in anthropology and a minor in sociology. Mr. McLean is the president of Southwestern Virginia Gas Company. He is married to fellow Carlisle alum Anna McLean, and they have 2 daughters, Harmon and Lucy, who also attend Carlisle School. Welcome, Mr. McLean. Mr. Hunter Haskins is a middle school history teacher here at Carlisle. He is a graduate of Roanoke College with a double major in history and political science and a concentration in public and applied history. In addition to his work at Carlisle School, Mr. Haskins also works as a docent and museum interpreter at Ferrum College's Blue Ridge Institute. He is a lifelong resident of Henry County. Welcome, Mr. Haskins. Our first 2 speakers this morning. First will be Will Vaughn. He is the son of Will and Meredith Vaughn of Martinsville. He is the brother of Harris in 5th grade and Sally in 2nd grade. Will plays soccer, tennis, and basketball at Carlisle and bikes and plays table tennis at home. He is in Scouts. This year, he is our SCA president, and he loves to read, and loving to read will come in handy when he attends UVA Law School in a few years. For his forum topic, Will has studied an important reporter and photojournalist of the late 19th century, Jacob Reese. Kaylee Pettit lives in Bassett with her parents, Katina and Lee Pettit. She arrived at Carlisle in preschool 4. Since then, she has been an SCA representative, an actor in school plays like Aladdin, a dancer, a choir member, an honor society member, and a babysitter. She enjoys hanging out with friends and animals and getting away on trips. She has made quite a study of a serious topic, Dorothea Dix, and the reform of care for the mentally ill. Please join me in welcoming Will to the podium.
In the late 1800s, America was booming. New skyscrapers, sugar, textiles, and petroleum products were on the rise. For many in this Gilded Age, this was a time of success and wealth. However, that was not the case for the lower class. Immigrants were packed into small, dark, windowless tenements, sometimes 12 people in a 13-foot room. Crime and filth were potent in New York slums. Waste is poured into the street. Something needed to change. Jacob August Reese was a Danish-American news reporter, photographer, and social reformer. He is known as a muckraker who, using photographs, exposed how millions of people lived in horrible conditions in the slums of New York City. He is also known for his numerous articles and books, which showed pictures of the horror of slum life in striking detail. His pictures raised millions of dollars for the reform of the living conditions in New York City. Jacob Reese was born on May 3, 1849, in Ribe, Denmark. The young Jacob Reese loved to read and was a decent student. When he was 12 years old, he noticed a shack with a very poor family living inside. He saved up some of his money and gave it to the family. They are grateful, very grateful, and used it to help themselves out. Over time, the family's condition improved. His father was a teacher, but he did not want to follow that profession. So, in 1870, Jacob Reese moved to the United States after his marriage proposal was rejected by Elizabeth Gortz. When he arrived in New York City, he tried many jobs and was often poverty-stricken and sometimes had nowhere to sleep. During all of these jobs, he came in close contact with the less prosperous side of city life. Reese had a natural ability to write and started writing for the newspaper for the New York News Association. He then quit that and started working for a much smaller newspaper, the South Brooklyn News. He worked very hard and bought that paper in 1875. He managed to turn around the struggling newspaper by doing all of the reporting, writing, printing, and delivering, which he had learned by working for the New York News Association. He sold the paper and used the money to return to his hometown of Ribe. Once at home, he convinced Elizabeth Gortz to marry him in 1876. They came back to New York and eventually had 4 children. When Reese returned to the United States, he was hired by the New York Tribune. He taught himself how to use a camera and became a photojournalist. He became one of their top reporters. Reese was an expert at reporting and used his ability to investigate to create the top stories. He was highly regarded by many newspapers and became very well known. During this time, he went into the tenements and the streets of the Lower East Side with the police to track crime and take photos. Tenements were the main housing option of the Lower East Side, New York's poorest area. In the late 1800s, this was the most crowded place on earth. Tenements were one-family houses that were cheaply turned into housing for lots of families. These houses had added floors and walls for barriers. Tenements lacked basic sanitation practices such as running water, lighting, ventilation, and bathrooms. Because of these inhumane living conditions, disease spread quickly. The cheap construction materials were also very flammable and fires were common. 2/3 of New York City's population lived in the tenements, making up 2.3 million people. Reese went with police and other photographers into the tenements and took hundreds of photos. One of his most famous photos is Lodgers in Bayard Street tenement, 5 cents a spot, taken in 1889. It exposes the horror of tenement life. The photo shows multiple poor people cramped up in a small, grubby tenement. They are very dirty and appear to be tired. Some of the members wrapped up in blankets on the floor because there were no beds for them to sleep on. The walls are painted in cheap whitewash and stained. All of the people had their eyes closed because there was no light as bright as the flash in the dark tenement. Once he had taken some photos, he had to figure out how to share them with the public. Newspapers and magazines refused to share them because they thought the photos were too graphic. So Reese wrote his first book in 1890, How the Other Half Lives. The book exposed the treacherous conditions in which the immigrants lived. His book sold millions of copies. The middle and upper class of the United States were shocked to see in the conditions in which these people lived. Wealthy people from all over the United States donated money to help improve the Lower East Side. Reese raised millions of dollars for the campaign. He gave all the money to the city of New York to be used for improving the Lower East Side. Reese became very well known as a masterful photographer. There was now a progressive attitude toward improving the Lower East Side. Reese was soon hired by the Evening Sun newspaper. He would continue his job as a reporter and photojournalist. He also still went to the slums to photograph the way poverty-stricken people still lived. It was during this time that he became great friends with Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt was greatly inspired by Reese, often praising him, calling him New York's best citizen and the best man in America. Reese published more books and also published an autobiography. In his autobiography, he talked about his life experiences from coming to America to taking photos and becoming successful. By 1900, there were lots of notable changes in the slums. New laws had been created to provide a fair housing, indoor plumbing, and provided safer conditions in the slums. During the rest of his life, he continued to take photos, now of children playing on newly built public playgrounds. These playgrounds were created because of the impact of Reese's photos. He also gave many speeches and lectures about his career. In 1913, Reese bought a house in Bear, Massachusetts. He moved there with his family and lived there for the rest of his life. He died on May 26, 1914. He was 65 years old. Jacob Reese changed the way we see journalism. He inspired others to continue his work. After How the Other Half Lives was published, hundreds of other muckrakers ventured into the slums of large urban areas to photograph the tenements. Ben Williams, 2003 Carlisle graduate and former journalist of the Martinsville Bulletin, was interviewed about his experience in the field of journalism. He stated that, "I think journalism gives people a wider understanding of the world around us." He also had experience writing stories about a lower income area. He said it was a very eye-opening experience. He says he likes journalism, saying that you can meet people from all walks of life. Jacob Reese helped show a nation of wealth and prosperity that there was another side of life. He helped improve quality of life in cities all over the United States by making living conditions in the lower class areas safer and cleaner. Even though he was later criticized for applying some racial stereotypes to some of the races that inhabited the tenements, he was a self-made man who gave back most of his money back to the people. Because of his utmost devotion to help others, he is known as an American hero.
Of all the calamities to which humanity is subject, none is so dreadful as insanity. All experience shows that insanity, seasonably treated, is as certainly curable as a cold or a fever. Dorothea Dix was one of the first mental health reformers whose devotion led to the welfare of the mentally ill, and this led to widespread international reforms. Seeing the horrific conditions that the mentally ill were forced to live in, and growing up with her mother suffering from depression, she spent her life persuading legislators to create state hospitals for the mentally ill. During the earlier 18th and 19th centuries, mentally ill people were forced into asylums against their will. The goal was to confine the mentally ill, the poor, the homeless, the unemployed, and the criminals. Mental health disorders were not recognized as treatable conditions. Dorothea Dix was born on April 4, 1802, in Hampton, Maine. Her mother, Mary,
suffered from frequent occurrences of depression. Her father, Joseph, was a traveling Methodist preacher who was often away from home. A strict and abusive man, her father, suffered from alcoholism and depression. Dix was a smart woman. She went on to become a school teacher. At the age of 19, she opened a school for young girls in her grandmother's mansion in Boston. The school brought her into contact with some wealthy people, including William Ellery Channing, whose daughters were students. This association proved to be very important. He went on to become one of her early supporters for mental health reform. In 1827, Dorothea Dix became ill with tuberculosis. This is a contagious disease that affects the lungs. It makes sufferers tired and causes pain. Her illness caused her to suffer from depression. Dix's mental illness, however, became a driving force in her desire to change mental health care. Her childhood experience with both parents drove her to try and eliminate mental problems and the insensitive treatment of patients. While Dix was sick, she started writing. In 1824, she published a science textbook for young students. This was the first of many books that she wrote. In 1836, Dix collapsed from tuberculosis and lost a lung. She sailed to Liverpool, England, in an effort to regain her health. In England, she learned of the works of Philippe Pinel, a French doctor who advocated for prison reform, and William Tuke, who founded a sanctuary for the mentally ill in England. They inspired her to investigate the treatment of the mentally ill in the U.S. She volunteered to teach a Sunday school for female inmates at a jail in Massachusetts. She witnessed the suffering of women with mental illness. They were chained to beds, starved, abused, and punished as criminals. Dix began visiting jails across Massachusetts and documenting her findings. It upset Dix to see how the mentally ill were treated. She asked her friend Channing for help. He told her to speak to some influential men to get the word out to the public. She visited with the head of the Perkins Institute for the Blind, Samuel Ridley Howe. She spoke with renowned education pioneer Horace Mann and famous anti-slavery advocate Charles Sumner. She gained their support. This support was valuable in accomplishing the work she was about to undertake. Howe published an article in the Boston Daily Advisor that criticized how the mentally ill were treated. In 1843, these findings were presented in a memorial to the legislature of Massachusetts. Legislators were shocked by the accounts of the ill treatment of mental patients. Dix asked the legislature for funds to reform the care of patients with mental illness in Massachusetts' only state mental hospital. Her request was approved. After this, she campaigned in other states. In 1844, the Providence Journal published an article by Dix explaining the living conditions of a man named Abram Simmons. He was a so-called insane man held in a jail near Providence, Rhode Island. Simmons' body was covered in sores. He was forced to live in a small cage for 30 years. There was no fresh air or ventilation. He had a small sack stuffed with straw for a bed, and it was freezing. In May, Dix convinced the Rhode Island State Assembly to take Simmons' case to the floor of the legislature. Confronted with this real-life example of mental health confinement, the Assembly was shocked. They began arranging for these practices to stop. After her presentation, a representative from Rhode Island announced that Simmons had died. Sadly, his situation was not corrected during his lifetime. By the end of 1845, Dix had visited 18 state prisons, 300 county jails, and 500 poorhouses in the U.S. and Canada. She helped to open 6 new hospitals for the mentally ill and influenced the improvement of other facilities. In 1848, Dix started working at the federal level. She submitted a bill to Congress that called for 5 million acres to be set aside for building mental institutions. The bill passed, but President Franklin Pierce vetoed it. Heartbroken, Dix left for the United Kingdom. She set out to investigate disgraceful hospital conditions in Scotland. The mentally unwell were seen as hardships towards their families and were kept hidden from the public. They lived in small cells with brutal conditions. She sent reports of her findings to Parliament. This resulted in 2 new Scottish hospitals to be operated, according to her recommendations. Parliament approved a law that granted funds for the improvement of asylums in Scotland. War began, and she volunteered as a nurse in the army. She was named Superintendent of Army Nurses. Dix trained around 180 women. She prepared them for medical duty during the war. Even though she was a very sensitive, caring nurse, she was also very tough. Her time as a government nurse was not entirely successful, as her blunt manner offended some people. At the age of 79, her health began to fail. She checked herself into the state hospital that she helped found in Trenton. Dix lived there until she passed away at the age of 85 in 1887. The hospital in which she died was the very first hospital she had built. Dorothea Dix changed the perceptions of mentally ill people and their treatment. According to Alida Turner, a nurse at Carlisle Roanoke Psychiatric Hospital, mental health care has evolved over time. Mental illness is more accepted today and is much more common. Today, mental health treatment can take place in different settings, and treatment is a team approach. Treatment is specific to and depends on the individual's needs. This happened because of the tireless work of Dorothea Dix. Even though Dix's last hospital in North Carolina closed in 2012, her influence is still present today.
Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Am I asking Will questions first?
Yeah, you can go back and forth if you want to ask them then.
Okay. So for Will, as you said, Reese was shut down a lot in his early career, and I wanted to know if in your research you found that any group sided with him before he made it big.
Well, he was often when he made friends with Roosevelt was the police commissioner, so he always had the police's support in his work.
Okay, thank you. And then for Kaylee, before Dorothy's involvement, how did the public perceive the mentally ill? Did they see that their treatment in the criminal justice system was an issue? Did they side with it?
They did not think it was an issue because they just thought that mental illness was something that you deserved, or it was because you were possessed.
Thank you.
Great job, both of you. You both covered a lot of ground and a lot of accomplishments. So in going through this process, just the same question to both of you. What would you view as both Jacob and Dorothea's greatest accomplishment?
I think Jacob Reese's greatest accomplishment was, seeing all of his work go into play, like with the foundings of the playgrounds, and they tore down all the old slums to make way for better conditions, better neighborhoods.
I think Dorothea Dix's biggest accomplishment was the first time she visited a prison, and she had the courage to stand up because she knew it was wrong the way they were being treated.
All right. Both of you did, excuse me, both of you did an excellent job. I thought it was very well researched in both of your articles. Will, we'll start with you. First off, happy birthday. Second of all, I know that you've done a whole lot of research, and we spoke before about different people that you've looked at throughout the past that might have influenced them. Would you like to elaborate on some of the other muckrakers that may have been in the same line of work as Mr. Reese?
In my research, I came across another person. His name is Lewis Hine. He wrote a book about very similar to Reese, but his book showed photos of children working in horrible factories, and his book was a very interesting read, and I enjoyed learning about him.
All right, and again, it was an excellent presentation. I really liked all the facts in it. It's my history teacher side coming out, I suppose. But I do have a question about possibly bringing it up today, to speed today. My question really is, do you think there are misconceptions about mental health today that might relate to maybe what we learned about in the past, or while it might not be possession or something like that, do you think there are lessons that we can take away from Ms. Dix and her mental health treatment that maybe we can apply today?
I do. I think even though we've come a long way since her time, we still have a long way to go because of some of the stigmatisms around mental health.
Thank you.
Excellent job. Will our next two speakers please join me on stage? Dylan Spencer lives in Martinsville, and our parents, Matt and Shannon Spencer, and our little brother, Caden, is our own Carlisle fifth grader. She is on the soccer team at school and is an SCA representative. She enjoys reading and art and dancing at Ray Hollingsworth's dance studio. Dylan's forum topic reaches way under the sea to examine the exciting work of underwater archaeologist Robert Ballard. Elizabeth Maxwell is the daughter of Ellen Wilkinson Maxwell and John Maxwell. She has an older sister, Catherine. Elizabeth enjoys a variety of hobbies, including jewelry making and cooking. She attends Camp Seafair, playing water sports. She plays volleyball at Carlisle and acts in the drama productions and sings in the choir. Elizabeth is active in her church, participating in the Loaves and Fishes project. Elizabeth is considering a career in law after attending Texas Christian or NC State. Her forum topic is drones and their uses. Please join me in welcoming Dylan to the podium.
When ocean explorer Robert Ballard called his mom to tell her that he had found the Titanic, she said that he would never escape that rusty old boat. He says that his obituary is already written as man who found the Titanic died today. Robert Ballard is one of the greatest pioneers of ocean exploration. His inventions and innovations of deep submersibles have changed how scientists are able to explore the deep ocean. His discoveries have made it possible for the world to see the ocean floor and shipwrecks that would have been lost forever. Robert Dwayne Ballard was born on June 30th, 1942 in Wichita, Kansas. He credits his inspiration for his career to seeing 20,000 leagues under the sea when he was younger and wanted to become Captain Nemo, who owned the submersible Nautilus to explore the ocean. Ballard earned degrees in chemistry and geology from the University of California at Santa Barbara in 1965. He was assigned to the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute on Cape Cod in 1967. He received doctoral degrees in marine geology and geophysics at the University of Rhode Island in 1974. One of his first major expeditions was Project Famous. In 1971, a French government organization wrote to Woods Hole that they wanted to explore the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. It runs down the middle of the Atlantic, almost completely underwater. They wanted to map an area that was thought to be a spreading center between two tectonic plates using Alvin, a manned deep research submersible. After their hour-and-a-half journey, they saw the new crust and confirmed the theory. Ballard was looking into using robots instead of manned submersibles to explore the ocean. They would be safer, cheaper, and can stay underwater for much longer. Dr. Dwight Coleman, current director of the Inner Space Center at the University of Rhode Island, who has also worked personally with Ballard, said it would take many hours to get to the seafloor, and because it was running on battery power, you'd only have a couple hours to explore the seafloor before you have to come back up. Ballard's career advanced as he developed this better equipment that made his underwater exploration safer, easier, and more efficient. Ballard had always had an interest in finding the Titanic, but it was always a pipe dream since nobody knew the exact location of the wreck. The Titanic was on its first voyage in spring of 1912, traveling from Southampton, England to New York City when it sank on April 14. Despite warnings about icebergs in the area, the captain, Edward J. Smith, slightly changed the ship's course but did not slow down. The right side of the hull scraped an iceberg, flooding compartments and sinking the ship. Over 1,500 people died that night. Ballard's pipe dream came true when he got the opportunity to go looking for sunken Navy subs Thresher and Scorpion. President Ronald Reagan approved an expedition that would look for the subs and gave Ballard 3 weeks to find them. After locating the wreckage of Thresher and Scorpion, Ballard was off to find the Titanic. Ballard had discovered with his dives at the Thresher and Scorpion sites that the heaviest objects of a wreck go straight down, and the lighter ones sink slower, allowing currents to carry them further away, leaving debris in a trail. If Ballard was able to find the wreckage, it would be very impressive. People had wondered where the ship was and its condition since 1912. On September 1st, 1985, they spotted the boilers 12,500 feet down. After he had celebrated the discovery, the enormity of the tragedy overcame him and everyone on board the ship. Around 2 a.m., someone remarked we were approaching the time of night when the Titanic had sunk into a sea as calm as the one we had now. It was not until this point that the emotion of the tragedy fully hit me. Its emotion filled me and never let go. They had to keep looking for bigger, more intact pieces to prove that they had really found the Titanic. They brought an Argo, a camera sled with 2 sonar systems, 3 video cameras, and a live video camera to get a closer look at the wreck and were able to determine that the ship had broken in two. They lowered Angus, which stands for Acoustically Navigated Geological Underwater Survey, a camera sled that could go down 20,000 feet to get color photos of the Titanic. Discovering the Titanic would change Ballard's life forever. Ballard returned to the Titanic site to photograph it and send a robot inside on July of 1986. They were testing Jason Jr., also known as JJ, a new invention of Ballard's on this dive. It was designed to get into wrecks to view the interior spaces. They found many items from the ship, such as silverware, luggage, boots, and other possessions of the passengers. The publication of the findings started a public interest in the Titanic that has never stopped. In 1993, Ballard decided to explore another major shipwreck, the Lusitania. The Lusitania was a passenger liner traveling from New York to Liverpool in 1915, a year into World War I. Germans had warned America that British ships would be torpedoed and Americans traveled at their own risk. A German U-boat fired a torpedo at the ship on May 7, 1915. After the torpedo hit, there was a second explosion. Of the 1,959 people on the ship, only 764 survived. There was controversy around the ship sinking. Some claimed that the Lusitania was illegally traveling with explosives purchased in America. Others thought that the British wanted the ship to sink, thinking the deaths of Americans would draw them into the war. Ballard left for Ireland in 1993 to uncover the truth of the Lusitania. They explored the ship with a few of Ballard's cameras and a manned submersible. They saw many items from the ship, such as linoleum floor tiles, a woman's shoe, and even a tub. They were able to determine what caused the second explosion and sinking of the Lusitania. After the long journey, the ship's coal supply was getting low. The Lusitania now had more coal dust than actual coal. When the torpedo hit the ship, the coal dust rose into the air. At the same time, a spark or flame ignited the mixture, causing a massive explosion. This showed that the coal dust explosion really caused the rapid sinking and not just the German torpedo. Robert Ballard's discoveries and innovations have helped the understanding of the ocean and important historical events. When he discovered the Titanic, more people started taking interest in the subject. He also helped make the tragedy event more real. Ballard has rewritten science books with discoveries of chemosynthesis and hydrothermal vents. What the world knows about the ocean is very little, and Robert Ballard has been working his whole life to change that. Imagine a situation where hours after you place an urgent order of medicine, it arrives at your doorstep without you having to leave your home. A drone could save the day. Drones are unmanned aircrafts guided by remote controls or computers. They have the potential to collect data and deliver products efficiently at a low cost. Currently, drones are most used for military operations, medical services, and agriculture. The first drones were developed in the United States and the United Kingdom during the First World War. Drones were not used much by the military until the Vietnam War in the 1960s. Drones were used in Vietnam as decoys in combat and used to launch missiles against military targets and drop leaflets over the enemy. One of the most important military drones in use now is called the Global Hawk. The Global Hawk is used for spying, and it can stay up in the air up to 24 hours and send back information on where enemy troops are. The Global Hawk is 44 feet long and a height of 15 feet. It can also gather information by satellite communications and data links used by an antenna. The Global Hawk is operated by the United States Air Force. Between now and 2029, the U.S. government will spend more than $5 billion on unmanned military drones. Drones are improving medical care in various ways. The drones that are used in healthcare are time sensitive and can transport organs. Drones have the ability to make organ delivery faster, safe, and more cost-effective. Several drone companies have been working on new ways to transport human organs in North America. Developers of drone science predict using larger drones as ambulances to deliver patients to the hospital faster. This will reduce lights and sirens on the streets. Drone ambulances could fly between buildings and over trees and avoid traffic in clogged streets. Remote areas can easily be accessible. In case of accidents in remote locations, drones could deliver supplies. One of the biggest uses for drones in healthcare is in diagnostics. Some diagnostic tests are time and temperature sensitive. So when a patient sample is taken, it must get to the testing center as soon as possible for accurate reading of the diagnostics. Instead of hours or days delivery time, drones could get the sample to the lab in minutes and improve patient care. In recent years, models have been developed and use technology such as solar power to help with the problem of fueling longer flights. Drones can be used by farmers to keep an eye on their crops. Chemicals will also be sprayed on the fields and can help with the development of plants and can also make sure that the plants are disease-free. Drones can also help farmers make better use of their land, and that will save money. Farmers will be able to grow more crops. In Florida, drones are used to constantly check on orange trees. Citrus greening is a tree-killing disease that affects citrus trees. Drones can be used in agriculture by predicting and examining crop growth, providing aerial views of crops, detecting animals, and controlling them. They can also provide warnings for crop failure while performing manual redundant jobs such as seeding, planting, and spraying. Additionally, drones can be used in advertising, gathering the news, and to help film movies. In the sports and entertainment industry, Drones can provide fun light shows and floating projection screens. Drones can be used to broadcast sporting events with various viewing angles and provide instant replay or officiating assistance for close calls that an average person cannot see. There are major concerns in different areas with drones. Drones have the ability to harm property, vehicles, animals, and people if they are not piloted properly. Drones are prohibited from flying near airports and in cities. There are more advantages than disadvantages for drones. The advantages are that drones are cheaper than any other aircraft, are environmentally friendly, safer than other methods, and save time. Drones have evolved and changed throughout the world, while changing the future and how drones were used in the past. Drones have impacted the United States by helping transport medicines, flight in the military, and to help watch over planes.
Both of you guys did an amazing job. I really enjoyed listening to you guys. My question for Dylan is, what do you think would be different in our world today without Ballard's work?
If people like him were not doing the work he is doing, researching the ocean, then the ocean makes up the very large majority of our planet, and that would be a whole part of the planet we wouldn't know existed and we wouldn't know anything about.
Thank you. And my question for Elizabeth is, what do you personally see yourself using drones for in the future? You talked about a lot of different applications, but I wanted to know something a little bit more personal.
I think I would use them just for fun to fly them around or to make like a video or a cool editing.
Elizabeth, I agree with you. So for Dylan, in your research, you talked about the Lusitania, you talked about the Titanic. What was the most surprising thing that you found that Robert Ballard discovered in his work?
Probably the more scientific things that, like the chemosynthesis and hydrothermal vents that we all obviously know about now, but during his time when he was discovering them, nobody knew they existed.
Great. And for Elizabeth, you talked about a lot of uses for drones: military, healthcare, agriculture, entertainment. What do you think is the most effective use of drones and why?
I think the most effective is for entertainment purposes because I think they're used a lot in sports.
And good job again to everyone. Dylan, you said at the very beginning of your speech that he had already written out his obituary, that it would be man who discovered Titanic dies at hopefully 9,500. What would your obituary for him be? What do you think you would highlight in his obituary if you had to write the big headline for him?
Probably include the Titanic just because it's very impressive, but also mention his more scientific discoveries that were more impressive in my opinion.
Thank you. And Elizabeth, you did well to highlight all the good things that drones can do, but also you leveled it out with all the bad things that people might recognize or have hesitancy to maybe adopt drones or bring them into society. My question to you is, do you see anything based off of your research that maybe suggests a way that people might resist drones coming into society? Or do you think maybe the march of time is too strong, that there's no way really to stop the development of drones and including them in the military or every facet of our life?
I think there are ways to make drones more useful and more efficient.
Thank you.
Excellent job. Our next two speakers, please join me on stage. Benjamin Stowe is the son of Robert and Jennifer Stowe of Danville. He came to Carlisle in kindergarten. He has a little brother, Elliot, in the 5th grade. Ben plays golf. He also enjoys video games and board games and friends and family. He was in the recent Aladdin play at school, plus he is a great reader. Ben's forum subject is the father of modern life, Thomas Edison. Will Kirby is the son of Billy and Sharon Kirby of Martinsville. He has a brother, Jack, and a sister, Caroline. Will is a member of the Boy Scouts and enjoys camping. He is a good tennis player and likes to play with his family dog. The subject of Will's forum research started out as a Scottish teacher and became an American inventor whose invention we still use today, 146 years later, Alexander Graham Bell. Please join me in welcoming Benjamin to the podium.
Thomas Edison's inventions created the world as we know it. Before Edison created cheap, safe electric light, many people were dying due to fires from candles that they were using to light their houses. Before the phonograph was invented, after a famous singer died, their voice was lost forever. Before the motion picture television was impossible. Edison's inventions made light from the darkness, recorded voices that outlasted the people to whom they belonged, and made television possible. Edison had a big family. He was born on February 11, 1847, in Milan, Ohio. He was the child of Samuel Edison Jr. and Nancy Elliott Edison. He developed hearing problems at an early age, and the causes unknown. He may have had scarlet fever and ear infections. In 1871, he married Mary Stillwell. Later, Edison started to work on the light bulb. Electric lighting had been an idea for a while, but no one could figure out how to make it. The big problem was trying to keep the bulb from overheating and destroying itself. He announced he would create an electric light that would replace gaslight and be cheap and safe. By October 1879, he had gotten good results with the platinum filament, which lasted 40 hours. Early bulbs were extremely bright and did not last long. A few months after he received his patent, he learned that carbonized bamboo filaments lasted over 1,200 hours. He quickly started developing these, which made electric lights safe, convenient, and cheap. He first demonstrated the light bulb for his investors on December 3rd. The first operation of the lighting system was installed on the ship Columbia in April 1880. The first land-based lighting system was installed in a New York printing company in January 1881. In September 1882, Edison supervised the installation of the world's first permanent power system in Lower Manhattan. He had installed dynamos and a distribution mechanism. Not all the issues had been resolved, and many years passed before electric lighting surpassed gas lighting. Some electric devices caused fires, though they were corrected. Edison was called the world's greatest inventor. Another invention of Edison's was the phonograph, invented in 1877. It could record and play back sound. It was used for recording telephone calls and other ways. Edison realized the potential of the phonograph. He said, "This will be useful for many purposes. A businessman can speak a letter to a machine, and his office boy, who need not be a shorthand writer, can write it down anytime, as rapidly or slowly as he desires. Then we mean to use it to enable persons to enjoy good music at home." The original recordings on tinfoil cylinders were fragile and short-lived. Phonographs were boxes with a cylinder with a horn attached to it on top. He started working on the light bulb, but came back to the phonograph later. The perfected phonograph was made in 1888. It was used in many ways, like recording calls and making toys. Edison worked on many inventions over his career, mainly at Menlo Park. He had a team of fellow inventors to make the inventions. He would create the idea, determine how it should work, and secure the funding. He would work for 16 hours at a time. He was one of the people who started the motion picture industry. He designed a camera and built the first film studio, a black building with tracks to turn and catch sun rays, since cameras needed light to work. It was named the Black Maria. It was located in West Orange, New Jersey. In 1891, Edison patented the kinetoscope, and movies were first viewed with people viewers. They were short and mostly showed everyday people. They were silent and a novelty. Sound movies came out in 1927. Still, the public loved them. Edison had little time for his wife or children. In 1884, Edison's wife, Mary Edison, died. Her cause of death was unknown. Relatives had to help the children. 2 years later, he fell in love with Mina Miller, who fought for nature preservation. They married in 1886. He purchased the house in West Orange, New Jersey, and they had 3 children. Edison was not very close to his children, though he made his son head of his company. Edison's real love was work. Everything else came second. Edison had a profound impact on the world. He was called the Wizard. He would tell reporters he had invented something, like a device to talk to the dead, and they believed him. He invented many devices we use today. His methods of working with others became the model which modern inventors work by. Edison was a collaborator who used the skills of various scientists to bring his ideas to life. Thomas Edison changed the world.
Watson, come here, I need you. Those were the first words spoken on a telephone by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876. With those words, Bell had finally done it. He had invented the telephone after months of working, development, and struggle. His upbringing, surrounded by the deaf, and his unique desire to help others inspired him to work hard and create the telephone, an invention that would go on to change the world and improve many lives. Bell was born on March 3, 1847 in Edinburgh, Scotland. Bell had many experiences with deafness in his early life. His mother was deaf, and his father was a teacher of elocution, or formal speech to the deaf. Bell had much more fascination with sound and speech research than other subjects, and so he dropped out of school in 1862 when he was 14 and was sent to live in London, where he educated to go into the family business speech therapy. Sometimes his father would visit and tell about his lessons in elocution, sparking a lifelong fascination and interest in elocution and teaching. Bell wanted to start teaching and working with deaf children, so in April 1871, he decided to move to Boston and begin teaching at the Boston schools for deaf youth. Bell's work with the deaf made him take an interest in sound machines, and he started to invent. He set up a small lab and would work day and night on his inventions, using the money he earned from teaching to fund his projects. He also started the Clark School for Deaf Children. While there, he met a student named Mabel Hubbard. Mabel Hubbard was the daughter of Gardner Green Hubbard, one of the founders and one of the daughters of the founders of the school. Bell and Hubbard eventually fell in love and wanted to marry. But Bell was not seen fit by Mabel's father and denied the marriage. Over time, Gardner Hubbard, Mabel's father, realized Bell was an intelligent and hardworking man and allowed them to marry. Bell and Mabel would later marry in 1877. Mabel was totally deaf, but she had learned to read lips so well that many people did not even realize that she could not hear. She was socially secure. Her marriage to Bell brought him investment money, social acceptance, and most of all, lifelong love and support. It was the most important thing that ever happened to him. Bell's first work was the telegraph. He experimented with its way of producing sounds. He started to design the telephone, but had not started working on it yet. Bell worked on the telegraph, trying to turn it into a speech machine until 1873, when his father-in-law started a government-funded telegraph company using the post office. Bell's talents with the telegraph were discovered, and he was soon added to the company. During his time there, Bell worked to invent the multiplex or harmonic telegraph, a new type of telegraph that could send multiple messages through the same wire. Bell began to work on the telephone while at the company, and with funding, he was able to work hard. Bell often worked day and night to complete the invention, with help and more support from his wife. He produced several versions of the would-be telephone, but they all failed. Then, on March 10, 1876, Bell finally managed to produce intelligible speech with the telephone. The first ever words spoken through the telephone were said when Bell shouted to the next room for his assistant, Thomas Watson, saying, "Watson, come here, I need you." Over time, the popularity of the phone grew, connected communities, and helped citizens. The telephone also included many industries and helped the economy grow. Businesses could sell and trade stocks easier and expand their industries into other countries. Following the invention of the telephone, Bell and his father-in-law set out to advertise the telephone. People did not see the need to have a speaking machine in their house, but over time realized how much of an improvement it was to the telegraph. Bell later opened the Bell Telephone Company, that eventually became part of the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, AT&T. Bell Laboratories was the research and development division of AT&T. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, Bell Labs developed many inventions, such as the first synchronous sound motion picture system in 1926 and the electrical relay digital computer in 1937. Bell Labs started working heavily in computer electronics and software, and that added to what would become the computer industry and eventually digital communication and satellite technology. In the 1950s, rotary phones started to take over. They used a specific type of dialing sequence in which the user would have to rotate the dial to see each specific number, then wait for a call. Landline phones were next. They had very similar to rotary phones, except they had no circular dial and used call waiting. Later in the early 1960s, cell phones were invented and began to gain popularity. Cell phones were more popular and common, which eventually led to the smartphones we see today. In Alexander Graham Bell's quest to invent machines that could translate and prove the sounds, he created one of the most important inventions in history, the telephone. Bell's interest in the study and sound came from having a deaf mother and later a deaf wife. Throughout his life, Bell would work hard day and night to accomplish his goal and never stop inventing.
Both of you guys did a really great job. My question for Ben is, you mentioned that everything in Edison's life came second to his work. In your opinion, was this something that was holding him back, or did this help his drive?
Well, I think that since he didn't spend much time with his children, he had more time to work and did more stuff. He might not have overdid everything he did if he spent more time with his family.
Okay, thank you. And my question for Will is, how did Bell convince the people that the telephone was worth having? Did you find anything like that in your research?
Bell would travel around and try to convince people. I mean, obviously, it was a humongous innovation compared to the telegraph. All Bell needed to do was try to convince them and show them. Many people were skeptical at first.
I agree. Great job, both of you. For Ben, Edison invented video, phonograph, light bulb. In your opinion, what was his most significant invention and why?
The light bulb. It meant that the workday didn't end when it got dark. People could continue to manufacture stuff after night.
Thank you. And then for Will, with the invention of the telephone, what do you think was the greatest impact that it had? You mentioned that families could talk to each other, that business was easier to get done. What was the greatest impact of the invention of the telephone?
I think the connection of like everyday families and citizens being able to talk to each other from miles away, hearing each other's voices after the telegraph where you type in beeps and everything.
Excellent research, boys. I learned a lot about both of those men that I did not know before you presented today. Ben, my question for you was originally what was his most important invention? But no, I would like to know, there are many other contemporaries at his time, of course. We've learned about some already, and we'll learn about some in our later presentations. But I have to ask, do you think that perhaps Edison's inventions are the most important to helping his contemporaries succeed? Without electricity, could Ford have still pioneered the automobile? Could Standard Oil still have been as big as it would without Thomas Edison?
Well, I think someone else would have come along and invented what he did. It would have probably taken a lot longer, but someone would have created it.
Thank you. And for Will, of all the things that you've learned and researched about Alexander Graham Bell, what's the number one most important thing that you want everyone here to take away from your presentation? What's one fact about Alexander Graham Bell?
He mostly never gave up and kept working, even when after he invented the telephone. He had many inventors and people claiming that they had invented it first and that he stole their idea. He never gave up again.
So thank you.
Will our next two speakers join me on stage? Owen Richardson is the son of Matt Richardson and our own upper school teacher, Christy Richardson. They live in Mayodan along with Owen's older brothers and Carlisle students, Casey and Gabe Richardson. Owen is on the Carlisle soccer and tennis teams. He is in the robotics club at school. At home, he helps out with activities on the farm. Owen has undertaken a study of the father of rocketry, Robert Goddard. Silas Wright came to Carlisle just this year. He is the son of Ann and Josh Avina of Eden. When he is not at school or working on his studies, Silas likes to play video games. Silas has an interesting forum topic, the super rich, eccentric inventor and entrepreneur Elon Musk, maker of electric vehicles and private space travel. Please join me in welcoming Owen to the podium.
Robert Goddard, the father of space science, was a genius of his time. Goddard came up with the idea of liquid fuel rockets and founded the method still used today. His idea and dream was to accomplish space travel. Inspired by events early in his life, Goddard's inventions would go on to change the world of science and space exploration. He improved rocket designs that scientists still use today. He used liquid fuel to power these improved rockets. Robert Goddard was born October 5, 1882 in Washington, Massachusetts. Goddard was an only child. In 1898, 16-year-old Robert Goddard was fascinated by the topic of space. After reading the novel War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, a novel where aliens invade Earth and humans start a war with them, the novel has advanced technology which caused Goddard to think about technology development. On October 19, 1899, Robert Goddard cut down a dead limb from a cherry tree and looked up at the sky. He was fascinated, but later he would write in his personal diary how wonderful it would be to make a device that could even have the possibility of landing on the moon. After seeing such a beautiful sight, he decided he would spend his life with rocketry and exploration of space. All his school life, he loved science. In 1904, Robert Garden went to school at Washburn Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts, which concentrates on instruction and research into technical arts and applied science. He impressed the head of the department so much that he was asked to be an assistant and a tutor to other students. He joined a fraternity called Sigma Alpha Ipsilon. Soon after, he left Washburn to go to school at Clark University from 1909 to 1912. There he studied physics and earned his master's and doctorate. In 1912, Garden went to work at Princeton University in New Jersey. He taught at Princeton from 1912 to 1913 while doing research on solid fuel rockets. After he left Princeton, he started a part-time job at Clark University as an instructor. He was the director of a physical laboratory. He conducted experiments on rockets every day for a year, but he could not afford to make liquid fuel rockets because the university didn't support him, so he started with solid fuel rockets. He had to continue his research with solid fuel rockets, but had the liquid fuel rockets in mind. His fascination with space surfaced in 1915. When he thought rockets would work in a vacuum, meaning rockets could have thrust into the vacuum of space. The media thought thrust could not be possible in space due to Newton's third law of motion that states every action has an effect. He proved them wrong when he conducted an experiment where he successfully shot a 3-meter rocket into a vacuum chamber. Garden and his wife saw this miracle. While he was teaching at Clark, he met Esther Christine Kiss, who was a secretary at the time. He married her in 1924. She worked for him by taking pictures and recording data on his rockets. While at Clark, he did research into solar power. He would convert the sun's rays into power. This method created problems with other scientists, so he believed he could overcome these problems. He used a parabolic dish, which would convert the heat into an electric generator. His research was then published in 1929. Later, he would quit Clark University to continue his research. He received $5,000 loans from the Smithsonian Institute to make a solid fuel rocket. Even though most of the Smithsonians criticized him, the man in charge thought it was a great idea, and so they gave him the loans. He also talked about how rockets could, in theory, fly to the moon. The idea of going to the moon skyrocketed, and the Smithsonians loved it. After his death in 1945, the Apollo 1 mission was a success. The reporters had to go back and change the story. World War I started, and Garden wanted the military to notice his designs. He wanted them to fund him, and the Smithsonians told him to make a more simple rocket design to prove that it would be useful. Garden created designs they would use, but 2 weeks later the war ended. Garden still found liquid fuel rockets were stronger than the average solid fuel rocket, so he went back and changed to his research to find a way to make one. On March 16, 1926, he fired his first liquid fuel rocket. It took 20 seconds to take off. It went a height of 41 feet and touched the sky. It was estimated to have traveled 60 miles per hour. When they found it, it had melted part of the nozzle. For the next few years, he kept working on stabilizing his rockets. Gyroscopes were used to control its motions, and exhaust jets were used to steer it. In 1929, Garden's launches made the headlines, attracting the attention of Charles Lindbergh. Charles Lindbergh, a famous pilot, was the first to fly a solo transatlantic flight from New York to Paris. Lindbergh helped Garden with his financial endeavors. Later help would come from the wealthy Guggenheim mining family. 1930, Garden moved to Roswell, New Mexico, where he continued his work. The emptiness of the surrounding desert was the perfect place to work on his rockets. For 15 years, he launched 31 rockets. In 1945, Garden died from throat cancer, leaving behind no children to follow in his footsteps. He did leave behind his research proving the value of liquid-fueled rockets and the possibility of space travel. He did not live to see his dream of space exploration using mechanical designs, because his death came 12 years before the launch of the Russian satellite Sputnik. and 13 years before the first successful American launch. Because of Garden's findings, we have rockets, satellites, and growing space exploration. After Apollo 1 set off in July 1969, the New York Times had to go back and make corrections to their paper. They deeply regretted their error regarding the mockery of him, Garden's early work, and they greatly praised him for his help to humanity's expansion into space.
Elon Musk has invented many things that will be important to our daily lives, which led him to become the most successful entrepreneur in the world. He has invented many incredible things, such as SpaceX reusable rockets, Tesla's electric vehicles, which are better for the environment, and Neuralink, which will allow you to use the internet with your mind. Thanks to him, we have come much closer to colonizing other planets in our solar system and potentially much farther. It all started when Musk turned 17. He moved to Canada to study physics and economics at Queen's University. After 2 years, he moved to the US to further his studies at Stanford University. But he left after only 2 days because he wanted to explore the internet's benefits for his companies. Throughout his career, Musk has created many companies, first of which was Zip2. Zip2 was founded in 1995 by Elon Musk and his brother, Kimball Musk. Zip2 was an online map and business directory. The mission of Zip2 was to help people navigate much easier. He later sold Zip2 to Compaq in 1999 for $307 million. Musk later used this money to create X.com, which he merged with Confinity in 2000 to create PayPal. PayPal is an online bank that people can send money to each other via codes. Later in 2002, he sold PayPal to eBay for $1.5 billion. With this money, Musk decides to keep going and creates new, much more eye-opening and important companies, and will continue to do so in the future. In 2003, he went on to create one of his biggest and most successful companies known as SpaceX, which is a space transport and aerospace manufacturing company. SpaceX's mission is to create reusable rockets that are cheaper and can carry more weight, but most of his heroes said this isn't possible. But even though they said that this would fail, Musk still keeps going. After much trial and error, it became one of the biggest achievements, which made SpaceX one of his most successful companies. Later in 2005, SpaceX developed their first rocket to get into orbit, called Falcon 9. Falcon 9 was the first out of 4 attempts to reach orbit and can carry about 50,000 pounds and was launched 5 times. He later developed the Falcon Heavy in 2018, which could carry 140,000 pounds and was launched 3 times. And SpaceX continues to create more rockets that can launch more material, satellites, and people into space for much lower prices. SpaceX was a huge success. Although SpaceX was a huge success, Musk decides to push even further and helps create his most successful company that we all know and love, Tesla. He has been long interested in electric vehicles and later became one of the major funders in Tesla Motors, and later became the main person associated with the company after he hired someone to convince the founders, Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning, to rename Tesla Motors to Tesla. It was a success when they agreed to pay the founders $75,000 to rename it. Now Musk is the leader of Tesla, and its worth is just over $900 billion. Another great invention by Elon Musk is Neuralink. Founded in 2017, Neuralink is a company that creates small chips that are surgically implanted into the skull that implants wires 1 millimeter long into the outer surface of the brain to read its signals clearly. This opens countless possibilities that will help cure brain diseases, process, and allow us to use the internet using only the power of our brain. Musk predicts that the first model of Neuralink will be available by the end of 2022. Musk is not only obsessed with tech, but also kind of scared of it. He says AI is the main threat to humanity's existence because of the intelligence gap, which he says is roughly that of a cat and human, if not much larger. Even though he fears AI greatly, he is still planning on using them to do many important tasks that most humans would fail at, and they could do so very fast. He plans to do this with a company called OpenAI. He plans to make artificial general intelligence, or AGI for short, which is a harmless AI type that is easy to control. Thanks to Elon Musk's inventions, we have come and will continue to go much further into the future. Musk has not only invented better rockets for space travel, but he has also been trying to help the environment with Tesla and even our own bodies and minds with Neuralink. Musk is trying to make all these things more affordable, which has made him one of the most influential people in history and the richest man in the world, at a net worth of $225 billion.
Both of you guys did an amazing job. My question for Owen is, why did you choose this particular research topic? Like, what about how rockets are built sparked your interest?
Space has always intrigued me, and because space is infinite, and there's always possibilities out there. So someone that caused the space exploration, pretty cool.
Thank you. My question for Silas is, how soon do you think that electric vehicles such as Teslas will become widely used in rural areas such as Henry County?
It'll probably begin to be used much faster due to gas prices going up because of the Russian situation. Of course, because demands will go up, so there will be much more production of the vehicles, and prices will go down.
For Owen, Goddard was interested in rockets. How do you think he would feel about Elon Musk sending private citizens up into space as they can pay for it?
I think he'd be a little confused, but I think he'd be pretty excited about it because he would know that his work would have brought new era to space exploration.
Great, thank you. And for Silas, between Tesla and SpaceX and Neuralink, what do you think is going to be the company that our kids remember the most?
Probably Tesla because probably Neuralink because it's going to, of course, help out with brain disease process and even allow us to do work even easier because we can use it out of our mind and all that.
All right, great job researching, boys. Owen, in researching Goddard, do you think there's a special quality that he had perhaps that made him succeed over maybe others who were starting out in rocketry? Or maybe it's just his drive and his will and there's nothing too special about it?
His determination, but also people criticized him a lot about his work because it was never done before. So he had to not think about their opinions and just keep going.
And Silas, you noted in your introduction that there is both a brilliance to Elon Musk, but also a lot of eccentricities. A lot of them get him in trouble sometimes. And so I have to ask you, doing your research, do you think that Elon Musk, for both his good and his bad, do you think he's a good role model? If so, why? If not, why not? He is.
But overall, he's going to have a very big impact. So,
All right, thank you both.
All right, our final two speakers for today. Lucas Sophie is the son of Linda Sophie of Martinsville. He has been at Carlisle since preschool 4. Outside, he enjoys tennis, running, hiking, and scouting. Inside, he likes Lego structures, graphic designs, gaming, art, robotics, and school plays. He is a member of the First United Methodist Church. He is a World War II history buff and an aspiring meteorologist or possibly an architect. For his forum topic is the heroic early space program. Charlotte Zagel is the daughter of Jessica and Brian Zagel of Danville. Her sister Lorelei is in the 10th grade and brother Thomas is in 5th grade. Charlotte has been a Carlisle chief since preschool 3. Charlotte is an SCA representative and enjoys baking and crafting. Her real passion is swimming. She swims on a team at Hargrave Military Academy. Her academic goals include attending Washington and Lee University. Charlotte's forum topic reaches to the stars and beyond, literally. She has identified 3 important contemporary NASA space projects that she will explain to us. Please join me in welcoming Lucas to the podium.
Early space exploration was not easy. In order to achieve escape velocity, you need speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour. You need to minimize the risk of space travel in the human body. Eventually, you have to find a way to send people into space and bring them home. You have to invent an array of new devices and techniques to make space travel possible. As it turned out, the United States did not start doing these things first, but it did them best. When the Soviet Union launched the first artificial satellite into orbit, it proved that people had the ability to achieve space travel. From just orbiting the planet to landing a human on the moon, to exploring the outer solar system, to launching satellites out of the solar system. What seemed impossible in the beginning was made possible. The 1950s were the beginning of space exploration for both the United States and the Soviet Union. The United States and the Soviet Union were both began to test spacecraft and explore space. The United States military and Air Force separately began creating their own spacecraft to launch to orbit. Before the United States could launch any rocket into orbit, the Soviet Union launched a 23-inch, 184-pound satellite called Sputnik, Russian for fellow traveler, into orbit. The satellite transmitted radio signals that could be picked up by scientists around the world. Sputnik orbited the planet for 3 weeks before its battery died. Over time, Sputnik's orbit decayed, and on January 4th, 1958, it re-entered the atmosphere and burned up. The launch of Sputnik caught the United States off guard as their first U.S. rocket wasn't going to be ready for launch until the next year. The launch of Sputnik fueled tensions between the countries because it meant that the Soviet Union had much more power than the United States realized. The United States government ordered the Jet Propulsion Laboratory to have a satellite ready to launch within the next 90 days. The goal was met in 84 days. The rocket was completed and ready for launch. It was moved to Canaveral Air Force Base in Florida. On January 31st, 1958, at 10:48 p.m., the satellite was launched into orbit. The launch was a success. The satellite, now named Explorer 1, would continue to orbit the planet for 4 months until its battery died and ceased operations on May 23rd, 1958. On March 31st, 1970, the satellite re-entered the atmosphere and burned up. Shortly after the launch of Explorer, all the United States organizations helping space exploration were combined into one main organization called NASA, short for National Aeronautics and Space Administration. NASA researches space and the solar system. They have many facilities located around the country at their main headquarters in Washington, D.C. The victory of getting this fourth satellite into orbit wasn't long-lived. The Soviet Union launched a second satellite called Sputnik 2 into orbit. Aboard the rocket was a dog named Leica. Soon after, President John F. Kennedy challenged the United States to a near impossible goal. Before the decade ended, he wanted to have a living human land on the moon and return safely back to Earth. NASA would achieve this goal with 3 different programs that trained astronauts and tested rockets. These 3 programs were called the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo missions. The first of the missions was the Mercury program. The program started on October 7, 1958. It tested the capabilities of humans in space and how long they can last. 25 flights with 6 different astronauts with the capabilities of the astronauts and how they performed in low orbit. The results of the experiment showed that humans could stand up to 34 hours in zero gravity. During the Mercury program, Alan B. Shepard became the first American to orbit the Earth in the Freedom 9 rocket on May 5, 1961. Next to the program was the Gemini program. The program tested the astronauts for space travel and exploration and tested the rockets to ensure they could make it to space. It tested how spacecrafts could dock in space, how it re-enter the atmosphere, and what effects space travel could have on astronauts. The program lasted from 1961 to 1966. During the Gemini program, astronaut John Glenn spent over 5 hours in low Earth orbit. Later in the program, astronaut Edward White became the first American spacewalk on the Gemini 4 rocket. During the Gemini program, the heat shield was put to use. The heat shield would protect the rocket and astronauts from re-entering the atmosphere. The shield would create a shockwave in the atmosphere that would protect the rocket and the astronauts. The Apollo program continued to test rockets and astronauts' capabilities in space. The program conducted research of the moon and the lunar atmosphere. The program lasted from 1961 to 1975. It consisted of 17 different missions. The Apollo 11 mission was a monumental achievement for the United States that marked the first human stepping foot on the moon. Neil Armstrong, Edwin Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins were the 3 astronauts aboard the CSM Columbia rocket. The rocket launched from Cape Kennedy on July 16, 1969. By July 20, 1969, the Apollo rocket made contact with the moon. Neil Armstrong became the first human to step foot on the moon, speaking the famous lines, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Before they left the moon, they gathered samples of dust and rocks from the moon. The end of the Apollo program didn't mean the end of American space exploration. On September 5, 1977, the Voyager 1 satellite was launched to explore Jupiter and Saturn. It discovered 2 of Jupiter's moons and thin rings around Jupiter. It also discovered 5 of Saturn's moons and a ring. Voyager is the farthest manned object in the solar system and is still moving. On August 1, 2012, the satellite left the heliosphere, the edge of the sun's influence on objects. The satellite's brother, Voyager 2, was launched from Cape Canaveral in Florida. Voyager 2 was launched before Voyager 1 because it needed to travel farther. The satellite was launched on August 20, 1977. It discovered the 14th moon of Jupiter. As the first man-made object to pass Uranus and discovered 10 moons. It was also the first man-made object to pass Neptune and discovered 5 moons, 4 rings, and the Great Dark Spot. The satellite also passed the heliosphere on December 10, 2018. Going space exploration was not an easy task. What started as a race between 2 countries involved in full space exploration. The Soviet Union achieved much more than the United States at the beginning, but the U.S. proved what they could do by landing a human on the moon.
Exploration is in our nature. We began as wanderers, and we are wanderers still. We have lingered long enough on the shores of the cosmic ocean. We are ready at last to set sail for the stars, wrote astronomer and planetary scientist Carl Sagan in his 2002 book, Cosmos. He was writing about early space exploration, including Earth orbits, moon visits, and the examination of Earth from billions of kilometers away. Sagan knew that was only the beginning of humans understanding our place in space. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, has been sending spacecraft and probes further and faster into space than ever before. Currently, NASA and other space agencies have 3 major projects underway. These include New Horizons to study the outreaches of the solar system, the Parker Solar Probe to take a closer look at the Sun, and the James Webb Space Telescope to see the creation of distant galaxies. Until NASA's New Horizons, no spacecraft has closely studied Pluto. So New Horizons mission was to do a flyby of Pluto and then go on to study other objects in the Kuiper Belt. New Horizons was launched on January 19, 2006, from Cape Canaveral, Florida. It spent most of its trip to Pluto in hibernation mode, only coming out for a gravity assist maneuver with Jupiter. New Horizons got to Pluto in summer of 2015. It discovered that Pluto has a diameter of over 2,000 kilometers, and that Pluto may have had liquids on its surface long ago, and may have an internal water ice ocean to this day. It also took beautiful pictures of the heart-shaped nitrogen glacier on the surface of Pluto. This glacier is the largest known glacier in the solar system, at 1,000 kilometers wide. After the Pluto flyby, NASA started to redirect New Horizons for a flyby of a Kuiper Belt object called 2014 NU-69, or Ultima Thule, which took place on January 3rd, 2019. This made history as the farthest space object to ever be closely studied, at over 6 billion kilometers away from Earth. New Horizons came within 3,500 kilometers of Ultima Thule. The New Horizons team uses deep space telescopes to look for more potential flyby targets. Spacecraft is still in great condition and is gathering data on the environment in the Kuiper Belt, and will exit the solar system and enter interstellar space in 2050. Most likely, the spacecraft's usefulness will outlive some of its creators. Getting the farthest away from the Sun is not NASA's only goal. Another goal is to get closer and study the only star we can reach, the Sun. The Parker Solar Probe has made history as the first man-made spacecraft to touch the Sun. Studying our closest star will help us understand the stars in faraway galaxies and the effect the Sun has on our solar system. Parker was launched from Cape Canaveral, Florida on August 12, 2018. The Parker probe was named after Eugene Parker, a solar astrophysicist who in the 1950s proposed the concept of the cascade of energy from our Sun and other stars. He called this solar wind. Understanding solar wind will enable scientists to protect astronauts in space, because solar wind can disrupt their equipment. The first flyby through the Sun's atmosphere got Parker within 4 million miles of the surface of the Sun. Another flyby happened on January 2022. Parker will continue to circle closer and learn more about our star, and as a result, the other stars in the universe. Spacecraft is not limited to how far we can travel. The James Webb Space Telescope will be able to study and learn about our solar system all the way to distant galaxies. It will help discover information about the universe and our place in it. Webb launched on Christmas Day 2021 from Europe's spaceport in French Guiana, South America. After launch, engineers maneuvered the telescope towards its destination 1 million miles away from Earth. The Webb telescope is about the size of a tennis court. The Webb telescope was named after James E. Webb, the second administrator of NASA. He oversaw the early space program all the way to the moon landing. The Webb mission was led by Gregory Robinson. Robinson was born in Danville, Virginia, and went to a racially segregated elementary school. He later went to Virginia Union University on a football scholarship, and then later transferred to Howard University. He's been working for NASA for over 30 years. The telescope will be able to look back in time to see the creation of early galaxies. Ben Wright, the immersive experience coordinator at the Danville Science Center, explains it can do this because the further away something is, the farther it's been traveling in time. Webb can see the light from far galaxies and as a result, see the creation of them. The Webb telescope may even discover elements that are not found on Earth. It could potentially learn about the origin of life. Webb will be looking for a molecule called polysynclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. PAHs are believed to have played a part in the origins of life on Earth. Finding these molecules elsewhere in the cosmos will be a significant step in finding life on other planets. Webb will start sending its first images to ground control in the summer of 2022. Space research has come a long way since the 1960s, as scientists learn more about the cosmos and the technology used to get there. Learning more about space can tell us more about the universe we live in, our solar system, and even our own planet.
Both of you guys did a really good job. My question for Lucas is, what has been your biggest takeaway from this forum experience? Was it more of learning how to research or writing your paper, maybe memorizing your speech?
Probably writing paper.
Thank you. And my question for Charlotte, which of the 3 projects that you mentioned is most interesting to you and why?
In my personal opinion, I think New Horizons was my favorite project, just because it's been traveling for so long. It's about to enter interstellar space, and just learning more about the outreaches of our solar system that we've never learned before is really, really cool.
For Lucas, of the 3 projects that you researched, the Mercury project, the Gemini project, and the Apollo project, which one of those did you find more interesting and why?
Probably the Apollo project, because it was responsible for getting first humans on the moon. And combined, it was like testing everything else the other programs have tested just into one.
Thank you. And then for Charlotte, similar question as the previous one. For the 3 projects you mentioned, which one of those do you think is going to have the greatest impact on our lives going forward?
The greatest impact on life on Earth, I think the James Webb Space Telescope can, because just the amount of things it can discover about our universe and just what's really out there could potentially really affect us.
Excellent research, both of you. Lucas, as I was listening to your speech, I was thinking back to our homeroom discussions of how you're so interested in some of the science there and bringing it forward and when we talk about it in the classroom. And so my question stems from that, but it is, why is learning this important information about the past of NASA important to the present and the future as we go forward?
They've been constantly person that's formed, what its future now, what its outcome could be.
Thank you. In Charlotte, again, great balance of research there, but also an optimism for the future that I really enjoyed. And so that also stemmed from the question I wanted to ask you, was that, of course, it's great to learn about the wants and exploration of space, but you might find a lot of naysayers now who might say, oh, well, we have too many earthly needs that we need to focus on. Do you think there's a balance that maybe we do need to scale it back or something? What do you say to those naysayers that say that space exploration should take backseat?
Well, space exploration is important because when we make the technology to research out there in the stars, it advances our technology here on Earth because it's hard to do space travel and expensive, but the technology formed can really help us here on Earth.
Thank you.
Please join me in congratulating our speakers today. They did an excellent job. Join me as well in thanking our panelists for joining us today. Wow, each year I'm impressed more and more with what I see on this stage. This is one of those milestones that you as a parent should be proud of, and you as an 8th grade student should be thankful for. You did an amazing job, and I'm very, very proud of you as well as the faculty. It's one of those things that we were talking earlier that you remember forever. It is mentioned in every single graduation speech form is. And it's something that you can be very proud of and know that it's going to carry you with these experiences through the rest of your life. So congratulations, and this concludes the 2022 8th grade forum.